Sarah Moore's hands trembled as she stared at the empty chair at the dining table, a dusty letter clutched in her weathered fingers. Tobias had left 3 days ago, taking every cent they had and leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note and 6 hungry children behind. Beyond the windows of their modest homestead, the harsh Montana Territory landscape of 1885 offered no comfort, only endless challenges for a woman alone. "Mama!" 10-year-old Emma tugged at her skirt, her blue eyes wide with concern. "Is Papa coming back?" Sarah swallowed hard, tucking the letter into her apron pocket. The oldest, 12-year-old James, stood in the doorway, already understanding more than any child should. Behind him clustered 8-year-old twins Lily and Rose, 6-year-old Daniel, and 3-year-old Benjamin, who still asked for his father every night. "No, sweetheart," Sarah finally answered, forcing strength into her voice. "But we'll manage. We always do." But as she looked around their small cabin, with winter approaching and supplies dwindling, Sarah wasn't certain how they would survive. The nearest town, Silver Creek, was 15 miles away, and the small garden they'd planted wouldn't sustain them through the coming months. Tobias had left with the wagon and one of their 2 horses, leaving them practically stranded. As night fell and she tucked her children into bed, Sarah sat alone by the dying embers of the fire, allowing herself a moment of despair. Tomorrow, she would be strong again. Tonight, she wept silently, wondering how a man could abandon his family to the cruelties of frontier life. Morning arrived with merciless brightness. Sarah had been up since dawn, mentally cataloging their meager resources. 3 weeks of flour, some dried beans, a little salt pork, and the milk from their lone cow. The children needed new clothes for winter, and the roof leaked in 2 places. "James, I need you to watch the little ones," Sarah instructed as she pulled on her worn coat. "I'm going to check the traps your father set last week." "Let me come instead, Mama," James offered, his young shoulders already carrying too much responsibility. "No, I need you here." Sarah touched his cheek. "You're the man of the house now." The weight of those words hung between them, unfair to place on a child, but necessity rarely considered fairness. Sarah had checked 3 empty traps when she heard the approaching hoofbeats. Fear seized her. Outlaws weren't uncommon in these parts. She ducked behind a large pine, cursing herself for not bringing Tobias's old rifle. The rider came into view, a tall man on a magnificent chestnut stallion. His broad shoulders were draped in a worn leather duster, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face. A cowboy by the look of him, with a lasso at his saddle and a rifle in its scabbard. He reined his horse to a stop, scanning the trees. "Hello," he called out, his voice deep but not threatening. "I don't mean any harm. Saw smoke from your chimney and thought I'd check if everything's all right." Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. Alone in the woods, she was vulnerable, but something in his tone seemed genuine. "I'm over here," she finally replied, stepping from behind the tree. The man turned, and Sarah could now see his face weathered by sun and wind, with intelligent green eyes and a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard. He wasn't young, perhaps mid-30s, with streaks of silver at his temples. "Madam," he touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Wyatt Quinn. I've got a place about 5 miles west of here." "Sarah Moore," she replied, keeping her distance. "My children are at home," understanding flashed in his eyes. "You're out here alone checking traps, my husband is." "Away," Sarah said, the lie bitter on her tongue. She wouldn't reveal her vulnerability to a stranger. Wyatt's gaze drifted to the empty trap at her feet, then back to her face. Something in his expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he didn't press. "These woods are getting trapped out," he commented instead. "Better hunting up by Willow Creek if you're looking to put meat on the table." Thank you for the advice, Mr. Quinn. Sarah straightened her spine. If you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my children. Of course. He nodded, but didn't immediately turn his horse. Mrs. Moore, I don't mean to overstep, but if you need anything supplies, help with repairs before winter, my ranch isn't far. The Silver Q, just follow the creek west. Sarah's pride warred with practicality. We'll manage, Mr. Quinn. I've no doubt, he replied with a slight smile. But the offer stands. With another tip of his hat, he turned his horse and rode away, leaving Sarah with empty traps and a gnawing worry about the coming winter. When she returned home, Emma and James were arguing over how to mend a hole in Daniel's shirt, while the twins were attempting to keep Benjamin entertained. "Mama," Rose exclaimed, "James says Papa isn't coming back ever. Is that true?" Sarah set down her basket and gathered her children close. "Your father has gone away," she said carefully, "and I don't know when or if he'll return, but we have each other, and that's what matters most." "But how will we eat?" Lily asked, always the practical one. "And who will fix the roof before it snows?" "I'll figure something out," Sarah promised, though she had no idea how to keep that promise. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with paper and pencil, taking inventory of their situation. The calculations were grim. Even if she sold her wedding ring, they wouldn't have enough to get through winter. A knock at the door startled her. It was nearly 9 o'clock, too late for casual visitors, especially this far from town. Sarah grabbed the rifle from above the door, holding it ready as she called out, "Who's there?" "Wyatt Quinn, madam. Sorry for the late hour." Sarah hesitated, then unbolted the door, keeping the rifle visible. Wyatt stood on her porch, hat in hand, with a burlap sack at his feet. "Caught more game than I can use," he explained. "Thought your family might appreciate some fresh venison." Sarah stared at the sack, pride battling hunger. "That's very kind, but it's not charity, Mrs. Moore," Wyatt interrupted gently. "Just being neighborly. I'd rather it feed your children than go to waste." She lowered the rifle slightly. "Why are you doing this?" Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or a memory. "Because someone once did the same for me and my sister when we were young and our parents died. Territory's hard enough without folks helping each other." After a long moment, Sarah nodded and stepped aside. "Please, come in." Wyatt brought the sack to her table, revealing not just venison but also potatoes, carrots, and apples. "From my root cellar," he explained. "Had a good harvest this year." "Thank you," Sarah said, meaning it despite her discomfort at accepting help. "The children will be thrilled." Wyatt's gaze drifted to the paper on the table, with its columns of numbers, then to the leaky corner of the ceiling where a pot caught dripping water. He didn't comment, but Sarah saw the assessment in his eyes. "Your husband," he said carefully. "He's not coming back, is he?" Sarah stiffened. "That's not your concern, Mr. Quinn." "No, it's not," he agreed. "But winter's coming and that roof won't hold against the snow." He paused, choosing his words. "I need help at my ranch, extra hands for the cattle, someone to manage the house. It pays fair with room and board for your family." "I can't just leave this place," Sarah protested. "The offer includes use of my wagon to bring whatever you want to keep," Wyatt continued. "And when spring comes, if you want to return here, I'll help you fix what needs fixing." Sarah studied him, searching for ulterior motives. "Why would you do all this for strangers?" "Because I've got more than I need, and you've got 6 children to feed," he answered simply. "And because no one should face a Montana winter alone." The practicality of his offer was undeniable. Even if she swallowed her pride and sought work in town, she couldn't leave the children alone all day. And the ranch would offer them security, at least through winter. "I'll need to think about it," she finally said. Wyatt nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "Of course. I'll come by in 3 days, if that's all right." Whatever you decide, I can at least help with that roof." After he left, Sarah sat for a long time at the table. The venison would feed them for days, the vegetables even longer. But what then? Pride wouldn't keep her children warm or fed. For 3 days, Sarah considered Wyatt's offer while watching her children grow excited over venison stew and apple tarts. She examined their home with new eyes, the drafty windows, the sagging porch, the garden that had never thrived in the rocky soil. Tobias had chosen poorly when he bought this land, something he'd blamed on her for suggesting they come west. When Wyatt returned on the 3rd day, he brought tools and roofing materials. Sarah met him outside. "I've decided to accept your offer," she said without preamble. "For the winter at least, but I have conditions." Wyatt set down his toolbox. "Name them. My children and I will have our own quarters. I'll cook, clean, and manage your household, but I won't." She faltered, uncomfortable. "Mrs. Moore," Wyatt interrupted gently, "I'm offering employment, not anything improper. You and your children will have the main house. I've been living in the bunkhouse with my ranch hands anyway. It's simpler that way." Relief washed over her. "And when spring comes, if we choose to return here, as I said, I'll help you make this place proper before you go," he confirmed. "Though I hope by then you'll see the Silver Q as home." 2 days later, Sarah stood watching as Wyatt and his 2 ranch hands, brothers named Tom and Frank, loaded the wagon with her family's belongings. The children were a mixture of excitement and apprehension, especially James, who viewed the move with suspicion. "Why are we going to a stranger's house, Mama?" he asked quietly as they packed the last of their clothes. "Because we need help, James," Sarah answered honestly. "And sometimes accepting help is the strongest thing you can do." The journey to the Silver Q took most of the day. As they crested a hill, Sarah gasped at the sight below. The ranch spread across a picturesque valley with a sturdy 2-story main house, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Pastures stretched in all directions, dotted with cattle. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods turning golden with autumn. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed from beside her. Wyatt, riding alongside the wagon, smiled. "My father started it with just 20 acres and 12 cattle. Took him 30 years to build it to what you see. Been adding to it myself for the last 10. As they approached the main house, a woman emerged from the door, tall, gray-haired, with a no-nonsense expression that softened when she saw the children. "This is Mrs. Peterson," Wyatt introduced her. "She comes from town 3 days a week to help with cooking and such. She'll show you around the house." Mrs. Peterson nodded at Sarah. About time this place had a proper family in it. Been telling him that for years. The house was spacious and well built, with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a large kitchen, dining room, and a comfortable sitting room with bookshelves full of volumes that made Emma's eyes widen with delight. Everything was clean but simple, clearly a bachelor's home without feminine touches. "You've the run of the place," Mrs. Peterson explained as she showed Sarah the pantry, stocked with more food than Sarah had seen in one place in years. "Mr. Quinn takes breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, and supper at 6. The hands eat in the bunkhouse except Sundays when everyone gathers here." "It's so much work for one person," Sarah murmured, overwhelmed by the size of the kitchen alone. "That's why he hired you," Mrs. Peterson said practically. "I'm getting too old to manage it all, and he needs someone here full-time, especially with winter coming. The last heavy snow, he was trapped in here alone for 2 weeks. Not good for a man to be so solitary." That evening, after the children were settled in their new rooms, the girls sharing one, the boys another, with Sarah in the third and the fourth kept ready for guests, Sarah descended to the kitchen to find Wyatt setting the table for supper. "You don't need to do that," she protested. "Been doing it for years," he replied with a shrug. "Hard habits to break." They worked together preparing a simple meal, moving around each other with surprising ease. When the children came down, they sat together at the large oak table that could easily seat 12. "Mr. Quinn," Daniel asked as they began eating, "where's your wife?" Sarah nearly choked on her water. "Daniel, that's not, never had one," Wyatt answered calmly. "Never found the right woman willing to put up with a stubborn rancher." "Papa said Mama was stubborn," Lily offered innocently. "Is that why he left?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Sarah's face burned with embarrassment and anger at having their situation so bluntly exposed. "Your papa," Wyatt said carefully, "made the biggest mistake a man can make. He gave up a treasure." He looked directly at Sarah. "Some men don't recognize what they have until it's gone. Others never had the sense to value it in the first place." The simple declaration, delivered without pity, somehow eased Sarah's humiliation. Wyatt didn't view them as objects of charity, but as people who deserved better than they'd received. After supper, when the children were occupied with exploring their new surroundings, Wyatt showed Sarah his office, where he kept the ranch accounts. "I'll pay you $20 a month, plus room and board for your family," he explained. "If that seems fair," it was more than fair, it was generous. A school teacher in town might make 30 without having to feed and house 7 people. "Why are you really doing this?" Sarah asked, needing to understand. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, looking out the window toward the distant mountains. 15 years ago, my wife and son died in childbirth," he finally said. "I threw myself into building this ranch, thinking work would fill the empty spaces." He turned to face her. "It doesn't. A house needs a family to be a home." "I'm sorry for your loss," Sarah said softly, "but we're not your family, Mr. Quinn." "No," he agreed, "but you need a safe place and this house needs life in it again. Seems like a fair arrangement to me." The first weeks at the Silver Q established a rhythm. Sarah rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Wyatt and the ranch hands. The children quickly adapted to their new surroundings, James and Emma helping with chores, the twins becoming inseparable from the barn cats, Daniel following Wyatt whenever possible, and Benjamin thriving with the attention of everyone on the ranch. Wyatt proved to be a patient teacher, showing James how to mend fences and care for horses. He spent evenings reading to the younger children or teaching Emma about the constellations visible from the porch. He never tried to replace their father, but offered something many of them had never truly had: a man who was consistently present and kind. As October turned to November, Sarah found herself watching Wyatt when he didn't notice. The gentle way he lifted Benjamin onto his shoulders, his patience teaching Daniel to whittle, how he never raised his voice even when the twins accidentally let the chickens loose. He was nothing like Tobias, who had been quick to anger and quicker to blame. One evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah found Wyatt on the porch smoking a pipe and watching the stars. She brought him coffee wrapped in her shawl against the chill. "Thank you," he said, taking the cup. "Sit a while, unless you're tired." Sarah settled into the chair beside him. They sat in comfortable silence, something she'd never experienced with Tobias, who always needed to fill quiet moments with complaints or demands. "Your children are remarkable," Wyatt eventually said. "James has a natural way with horses, and Emma, that girl's smarter than most grown men I know." Pride warmed Sarah's chest. "They've had to grow up quickly." "Too quickly," Wyatt agreed, "but they're resilient like their mother." Sarah felt her cheeks flush and was grateful for the darkness. "Necessity makes us strong." "No," Wyatt disagreed gently. Necessity reveals the strength that was already there. He paused, tamping down his pipe. Tobias was a fool to leave you. The direct mention of her husband startled her. How did you know his name? Daniel mentioned it. He talks about his father sometimes. Wyatt's voice held no judgment. The little ones still miss him. They remember the good days, Sarah said quietly, before the drinking started, before he began blaming me for everything that went wrong. It was the first time she'd spoken openly about Tobias's failings. The words felt both disloyal and liberating. No child should grow up with a father who doesn't treasure them, Wyatt said, his voice hardening slightly. Or a mother either. Something in his tone suggested personal experience. Your parents, Sarah ventured. My father worked us like hired hands and treated my mother like one too, Wyatt confirmed. When she died, he barely noticed except to complain about the cooking. When he finally drank himself to death, my sister and I were more relieved than sad. He shook his head. Swore I'd never be that kind of man. Thought I'd get the chance to prove it with my own family, but life had other plans, Sarah finished for him. Wyatt nodded, his profile strong against the starlit sky. Life always does. The question is what we make of the plans we're given. The first snow came in late November, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. The children were ecstatic, building snowmen and having snowball fights that even Wyatt joined, his deep laugh ringing out as Benjamin stuffed snow down the back of his coat. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, her hands busy with bread dough. The scene before her was one of simple joy, something that had been missing from their lives for too long. She realized with a start that she hadn't thought about Tobias in days. The ache of his betrayal was fading, replaced by gratitude for their new circumstances. That evening, after supper, Wyatt pulled a crate from the storage room. Thought the house could use some Christmas cheer, he explained as he opened it to reveal ornaments wrapped in newspaper delicate glass balls, carved wooden figures, and paper stars. Christmas is still weeks away, Sarah pointed out, though the children were already excitedly unwrapping the decorations. Best to be prepared, Wyatt replied with a wink. Tomorrow we'll cut a tree. More family tradition starts now. First snow means Christmas preparations begin. That's not our tradition, Lily said, confused. It is now, James surprised everyone by saying. Right, Mama? Sarah felt something shift in that moment, acceptance of their new life, perhaps, or simply the recognition that joy was possible again. Yes, she agreed. It is now. As promised, the next day Wyatt took everyone in the sleigh to find the perfect tree. They returned hours later, cold and laughing, with a magnificent pine that nearly touched the ceiling when they set it up in the sitting room. That night, after decorating the tree and singing carols around the piano that Emma was learning to play, Sarah found herself standing alone with Wyatt, admiring their handiwork. Thank you, she said softly, for giving them this. Thank you for bringing life back to this house, he replied, his voice equally quiet. His hand found hers in the semi-darkness, fingers intertwining naturally. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through Sarah's body. They stood that way for several minutes, hands joined, watching the firelight reflect off the ornaments. Neither spoke, but something significant had changed between them, a boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged. The days leading to Christmas were filled with secret projects, baking, and anticipation. Sarah hadn't seen her children this happy in years. Even James, who had maintained a certain wariness around Wyatt, was softening, especially after Wyatt gave him his own tool set and began teaching him carpentry. On Christmas Eve, after the children were finally asleep, Sarah descended to the sitting room to place the last few gifts under the tree, modest items she'd made from fabric remnants and things ordered from the Sears catalog. She was surprised to find Wyatt there, adding several packages of his own. "I hope you don't mind," he said, looking almost boyishly uncertain. "Nothing extravagant, just things I thought they might like." Sarah smiled. "Of course I don't mind. You've done so much already." Wyatt straightened, crossing to where a small package sat on the mantel. "This one's for you," he said, handing it to her. "But I'd like you to open it now, if that's all right." Sarah unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a silver pendant on a delicate chain, a quartz crystal wrapped in intricate silverwork. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her finger over the polished stone. "It was my mother's," Wyatt explained. "The only thing of value she ever owned. My father gave it to her when they were courting before life hardened him." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I've been keeping it for someone special." Sarah looked up at him, her heart pounding. "Wyatt, I can't accept this." "You can," he insisted gently. Unless I've misunderstood what's growing between us." She hadn't heard her first name from his lips before. The intimacy of it, combined with the significance of the gift, made her tremble slightly. "You haven't misunderstood," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "but it's too soon. Tobias has been gone less than 3 months." "I know," Wyatt nodded, "and I'm not asking for promises. Just permission to hope." He was so different from Tobias' patient where her husband had been demanding, gentle where he had been harsh. The realization that she was comparing them, finding Tobias wanting, brought both guilt and relief. "Hope is a gift I can give," Sarah finally said, holding out the necklace. "Will you help me put it on?" Wyatt's fingers were surprisingly deft as he fastened the clasp at the nape of her neck. His touch lingered there, warm and possessive in a way that made Sarah's breath catch. When she turned to face him, they were standing very close. His eyes asked a question, her slight nod answered it. The kiss that followed was gentle, tentative, a beginning rather than a demand. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. The children's excitement filled the house as they opened their gifts books for Emma. The tool set for James officially presented. Dolls for the twins, a wooden train for Daniel, and a stuffed bear for Benjamin. Wyatt's additions were perfect ice skates for everyone, as the pond near the house had frozen solid. The day was spent learning to skate, with much laughter and many tumbles. Sarah, who hadn't skated since girlhood, found herself held firmly by Wyatt's strong hands as she rediscovered her balance. Their eyes met often, secret smiles passing between them that the children, absorbed in their new skill, didn't notice. That evening, as they sat exhausted but happy around the fire, Benjamin crawled into Wyatt's lap with his new bear. "Read story," he demanded sleepily. "Please," Sarah corrected automatically. "Please," Benjamin echoed, snuggling against Wyatt's chest. As Wyatt began reading from a book of children's tales, Sarah looked around at her children safe, warm, well-fed, and content. For the first time since Tobias left, she felt not just resignation to their circumstances but genuine happiness. Later, after the children were asleep, Wyatt and Sarah stood again by the tree, the house quiet around them. "Best Christmas I can remember," Wyatt said, his arm around her shoulders. "For us too," Sarah agreed, leaning into his strength. "You've given us so much." "You've given me more," he replied, turning to face her. "A purpose beyond work, laughter in this house again." His hand caressed her cheek, and hope for a future I'd stopped believing was possible. This time when they kissed, there was no hesitation, only a growing certainty that what they had found together was rare and precious. January brought brutal cold and a blizzard that kept everyone indoors for days. The forced proximity might have been difficult, but instead it cemented their emerging family bonds. Wyatt taught the children card games and told stories of his early days on the ranch. Sarah discovered he was a surprisingly good baker, and they spent hours in the kitchen together, creating elaborate pastries that disappeared almost instantly. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Sarah and Wyatt would sit before the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes reading companionably, and increasingly finding moments to explore their growing feelings with kisses and caresses that left them both longing for more, but unwilling to rush. "I never thought I could feel this way again," Wyatt confessed one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her palm. "After losing Caroline and the baby, I closed that part of myself off, decided it was safer not to love." "What changed?" Sarah asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "You," he said simply. "All of you. Watching you with your children, seeing your strength and grace despite everything you've been through." His eyes held hers intently. "You reminded me that the risk of loss is worth taking for the chance at joy." By February, their feelings were impossible to hide from the children. James was the first to confront his mother, finding her alone in the kitchen one afternoon. "You're in love with him," he stated flatly. Sarah set down the dish she was drying. "Would that be so terrible?" James looked conflicted. "What about Papa?" "Your father left us, James," Sarah said gently. "He chose to walk away from his responsibilities, from the people who loved him." "But what if he comes back?" James persisted. Sarah sighed, sitting at the table and gesturing for James to join her. "If your father returned tomorrow, would you want to go back to the way things were? The arguments, the drinking, the uncertainty?" James stared at his hands. "No," he admitted quietly. "But—" he struggled with words. "If you love Mr. Quinn and we stay here, it's like saying Papa doesn't matter anymore." "Your father will always be your father," Sarah assured him. "Nothing changes that, but people can have more than one person who cares for them." She reached for his hand. "Wyatt respects you children too much to try to replace your father. He just wants to be part of our lives if we'll let him." "He makes you smile," James observed. "You didn't smile much before." "No," Sarah agreed. "I didn't have much reason to." James was quiet for a long moment. "The other day, when I was helping him mend the corral, he said I have good hands for building things. Said maybe I could design houses someday." Pride crept into his voice. "Papa never said stuff like that." "Wyatt sees the best in people," Sarah said. "It's a rare quality." James nodded slowly. I guess it wouldn't be so bad staying here, being a family with him." The conversation with James seemed to open a floodgate. That evening at supper, Emma asked bluntly, "Are you going to marry Mr. Quinn, Mama?" Sarah nearly choked on her stew. Wyatt, to his credit, merely raised an eyebrow, waiting for her response. "That's not something we've discussed, Emma," Sarah finally managed. "Well, you should," Lily chimed in, "because we want to stay here forever." "Forever is a very long time," Wyatt said seriously. "Are you sure you wouldn't get tired of me?" "No," several voices chorused. "You teach us things," Daniel explained. "And you don't yell when we make mistakes. And you give the best piggyback rides," Benjamin added, making everyone laugh. Wyatt's eyes found Sarah's across the table. "I'm quite fond of your mother," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "And all of you. If staying at the Silver Q would make you happy, nothing would please me more." "But," Sarah interjected, feeling she needed to maintain some parental authority, "these aren't decisions children make. They're for adults to discuss privately." "Well, discuss it soon," Rose advised with all the wisdom of her 8 years. "Because spring will be here before you know it, and you said we'd decide then if we're going back to our old house." The children's directness broke the ice. That night when they were alone, Wyatt took Sarah's hands in his. "They have a point," he said with a smile. "Spring will be here soon." Sarah's heart quickened. "Are you asking me something, Wyatt Quinn?" "Not yet," he replied. "But I'm thinking about it very seriously." His thumbs caressed her wrists. I want to do this right, Sarah, not rushed because of circumstances or practicalities. When I ask you to be my wife, I want it to be because we both know, beyond any doubt, that it's what we want. His consideration touched her deeply. Tobias had proposed in a moment of passion, and their hasty marriage had begun to unravel almost immediately. Wyatt's patience, his desire to build a solid foundation, spoke volumes about the kind of husband he would be. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "I'm not ready to make promises yet, but—" She stepped closer, her hands moving to his chest. "I'm getting closer every day." His kiss was tender, full of promise and restrained desire. When they parted, both were breathing heavily. "I should go upstairs," Sarah whispered. "Before I'm not able to leave." Wyatt groaned softly, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're a temptation, Sarah Moore." "As are you," she admitted, "but we'll do this right." March brought the first signs of spring, patches of ground emerging from melting snow, birdsong returning to the trees, longer days filled with light. As the season of renewal progressed, Sarah found herself thinking less about returning to their old homestead and more about the possibility of making the Silver Q their permanent home. The children had blossomed over the winter. James had become Wyatt's shadow, learning ranching skills with enthusiasm. Emma had devoured half the books in the house and was talking about becoming a teacher someday. The twins had adopted the entire barnyard as their domain, with Wyatt building them a special platform so they could collect eggs without disturbing the hens. Daniel had revealed a talent for drawing that Wyatt encouraged with proper paper and pencils. And Benjamin, who had been so solemn after his father left, now laughed constantly, secure in the affection that surrounded him. One warm afternoon in early April, Wyatt suggested a ride to show Sarah a special place on the property. They left the children in Mrs. Peterson's capable hands and rode out together. Sarah on a gentle mare Wyatt had been teaching her to ride over the winter. They followed the creek for nearly 2 miles, eventually coming to a small, hidden valley surrounded by cottonwoods. A natural meadow filled with early wildflowers spread before them, with the creek widening into a perfect swimming hole. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed as they dismounted. "My favorite spot on the whole ranch," Wyatt said, taking her hand as they walked toward the water. "I come here to think, or when decisions need making." He glanced at her. "Thought you might like to see it." They settled on a fallen log near the water, comfortable in each other's company. Wyatt seemed unusually thoughtful, almost nervous. "Spring's nearly here," Sarah observed. "The children were asking yesterday when we'd plant the garden. And have you decided?" Wyatt asked quietly. "About staying." Sarah turned to face him fully. "I think we both know we're not leaving, Wyatt. This is our home now if you still want us." "Want you?" He laughed, the sound tinged with disbelief. "Sarah, having you and the children here has been the greatest blessing of my life." He took both her hands in his. "I've been carrying something around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "I know it hasn't been that long," Wyatt said, suddenly uncertain. "If you need more time—" "No," Sarah interrupted. "No more time. These months have shown me everything I need to know about you, Wyatt Quinn." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're the man I want to spend my life with, to raise my children with. The man I love." It was the first time either had spoken the word aloud, though it had lived in their hearts for months. "I love you, Sarah Moore," Wyatt said, his voice husky with emotion. "Will you marry me? Let me be a father to your children, a husband to you for all the days we have." "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Yes to everything." The kiss that sealed their engagement was passionate, unrestrained by the propriety they'd maintained in the house. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "When?" Wyatt asked, sliding the ring onto her finger. "How soon can I call you my wife?" "The children will want a proper wedding," Sarah mused. "Time to plan, to invite the neighbors." "June," Wyatt suggested. "When the meadow is full of flowers. We could marry right here, with the mountains as witnesses." The image was perfect, a new beginning in a place of natural beauty, surrounded by those they loved. "June," Sarah agreed. "And then forever." They returned to the ranch hand in hand, both unable to stop smiling. The children spotted the ring immediately, their reactions ranging from Emma's tearful happiness to Benjamin's confused question about whether he should call Wyatt Papa now. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," Wyatt answered, kneeling to the little boy's level. "I'll never try to replace your father in your memories, but I promise to love you and care for you as if you were my own son, every day of my life." The simplicity and honesty of his promise moved even James, who stepped forward to shake Wyatt's hand with newfound maturity. "We're lucky to have you," the boy said solemnly. "All of us." The following weeks were filled with wedding preparations. News spread quickly through the nearby ranches and into Silver Creek. Sarah was touched by how the community embraced them, women visiting with fabric samples and recipe suggestions, men offering to help prepare the meadow for the ceremony. "You're well liked," she commented to Wyatt after a particularly busy Sunday dinner with neighbors. "People respect fair dealing and hard work," he replied modestly. "And they're happy to see the confirmed bachelor finally settling down with a family." His smile was tender as he watched the children playing with the neighbors' children in the yard. "Can't say I blame them. Best decision I ever made was riding by your homestead that day." May brought Sarah's first letter from Tobias in nearly 7 months. His untidy scrawl filled a single page with excuses, complaints about his luck in the gold fields, and a vague suggestion that he might return to see the children when his fortunes improved. Sarah read it twice, searching for any genuine remorse or concern for the family he'd abandoned. Finding none, she brought the letter to Wyatt, who read it without comment. "What will you tell him?" he finally asked, handing it back. "The truth," Sarah decided. "That the children are thriving, that I'm marrying a good man who treats them with love and respect, and that if he ever wants to see them, he'll need to prove he's changed." Wyatt nodded, his expression serious. "And if he challenges our marriage?" "Legally, he abandoned you, but he might claim rights to the children." The thought sent a chill through Sarah. "Would he win?" "No," Wyatt said firmly. "Not only because I have friends in the territorial court, but because any judge would see what's best for those children." He took her hands. "But I want you to be prepared in case he tries." Sarah squared her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of Tobias anymore. We've built something too strong for him to destroy." Her letter to Tobias was direct and unapologetic. She detailed their new life, her engagement, and her conditions if he wished to have any contact with his children in the future. Whether he would respond or simply disappear again remained to be seen, but Sarah found she could face either possibility with equanimity. June arrived with perfect weather. The meadow Wyatt had shown Sarah now a riot of color: purple lupines, orange paintbrush, yellow buttercups, and blue forget-me-nots, creating a natural carpet for their wedding. A simple arch of twisted branches marked the spot where they would exchange vows, decorated with ribbon and wildflowers by the twins, who had appointed themselves official wedding designers. On the morning of the wedding, Sarah stood in her bedroom at the ranch house, Emma and Mrs. Peterson helping her dress in a gown of ivory silk ordered from Denver. It was more elegant than anything she'd ever owned, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. "You look beautiful, Mama," Emma said, her eyes shining with tears. "She certainly does," agreed a voice from the doorway. Sarah turned to see James, handsome in his new suit, watching with an expression that mingled pride and wistfulness. "Mr. Quinn asked me to give you this." He handed her a small package. Inside was a bracelet of silver and quartz that matched the pendant Wyatt had given her at Christmas, along with a note. "To match the first gift of many, I'll be waiting for you in our meadow. All my love, W." Tears threatened to ruin the careful arrangement of her hair. "Tell him I'll be there soon," she managed. The journey to the meadow was made in a wagon decorated with flowers and ribbons, the children riding alongside except for Benjamin, who insisted on sitting with his mother. Neighbors and friends from miles around had gathered, creating a sizable congregation in the wilderness setting. When Sarah reached the arch where Wyatt and the minister waited, a hush fell over the gathering. Wyatt's face as he watched her approach was a study in awe and devotion. James, in a moment that brought tears to every eye, formally walked his mother to her groom and placed her hand in Wyatt's before stepping back to join his siblings. The ceremony was simple but profound. They had written their own vows, promises that acknowledged their past losses and embraced their future together. When Wyatt spoke of becoming a father to her children, his voice broke with emotion. When Sarah pledged her trust and love to him, the sincerity in her eyes left no doubt in anyone's mind that this union was one of true hearts. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience but unable to disguise the passion that simmered beneath the surface. As they turned to face their guests, now officially family, the children surged forward to embrace them both. "Does this mean we're the Quinn family now?" Daniel asked. "It does," Wyatt confirmed, lifting the boy onto his shoulders. "Every last one of you." The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up near the swimming hole, laden with food contributed by every ranch wife for miles. Lanterns hung from the trees, creating a magical atmosphere as darkness fell. There was dancing to fiddle music, laughter, and so many good wishes that Sarah felt overwhelmed by the community's embrace. As the night grew late, and the younger children began to droop with exhaustion, Wyatt announced that it was time to take his family home. There were knowing smiles among the adults. Mrs. Peterson had offered to stay with the children at the ranch house, while the newlyweds spent their wedding night in a special cabin Wyatt had prepared at the far end of the property. After seeing the children settled with Mrs. Peterson, Wyatt led Sarah to where 2 horses waited. "One last ride tonight," he explained, helping her mount despite her wedding dress. "I have somewhere special to show you." They rode in the moonlight, Sarah following Wyatt along a trail she hadn't seen before. After about a mile, they emerged into a small clearing where a cabin stood, lamplight glowing from its windows. "When did you build this?" Sarah asked in astonishment as Wyatt helped her dismount. "I started it the day after you accepted my proposal," he admitted. "With James's help, actually. He's got a real talent for building." He looked slightly nervous. "I thought we might want a place that's just ours sometimes, away from the main house. Somewhere the children can come to, for fishing trips or special occasions." The thoughtfulness of the gesture creating a space that could be both a private retreat for them and a family gathering place typified the man she had married. Always considering everyone's needs, finding balance between intimacy and inclusion. The cabin's interior was simple but beautiful, with a stone fireplace, comfortable furnishings, and windows positioned to capture the mountain views. A fire crackled welcomingly, and flowers from their wedding decorated every surface. "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Wyatt watched her, his eyes darkening with desire now that they were finally alone. "You're perfect," he countered, crossing to take her in his arms. "My wife." The word sent a thrill through Sarah. "My husband," she replied, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. Finally. Their kiss deepened quickly, months of restrained passion finding release. Wyatt's hands trembled slightly as they moved to the buttons of her dress, his touch reverent. "I've dreamed of this night," he confessed against her throat, "of making you mine completely." "I've been yours in my heart for months," Sarah assured him, her own fingers working at his shirt buttons. "Now we have forever to show each other how much." The night that followed was one of discovery and devotion, their bodies finding the same harmony their hearts had already established. In Wyatt's arms, Sarah felt cherished in a way she never had before, as an equal partner, a desirable woman, a beloved wife. As dawn broke over the mountains, they lay tangled together, watching the light change through the cabin windows. "Happy?" Wyatt asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Beyond words," Sarah murmured, nestling closer to his warmth. "I never thought I'd feel this way, safe, treasured, complete." "That's how I intend you to feel every day for the rest of our lives," Wyatt promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You and our children." The word "our" caught Sarah's attention. "You truly see them that way, don't you? Not as an obligation you've taken on, but as your own." "From the moment you all stepped into my home, they became mine in my heart," Wyatt confirmed. "Not to replace their father, but to give them what every child deserves: unconditional love and support." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "And perhaps when you're ready we might add to our family." The question held hope but no pressure. Once again, Sarah marveled at his ability to express his desires while respecting her needs. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Not immediately, but yes. A child of our own would be a blessing." Wyatt's smile was radiant. "Our family of 9, he mused. "Who would have thought a confirmed bachelor like me would end up with such riches?" They returned to the main house mid-morning to find the children and Mrs. Peterson preparing a welcome breakfast. There were knowing looks but no teasing, just genuine happiness at seeing the newlyweds so obviously content. The summer passed in a haze of happiness. The ranch prospered, the children thrived, and Sarah and Wyatt settled into married life with a harmony that seemed to come naturally. In August, they took the entire family to Denver for a week, staying in a fine hotel and visiting shops, museums, and theaters, experiences the children had never had before. "You're spoiling them," Sarah observed as Wyatt purchased yet another book for Emma's growing collection. "Making up for lost time," he corrected with a wink. "Besides, education is never a waste. These children have bright futures ahead of them, and I intend to make sure they have every opportunity to fulfill their potential." By the time autumn painted the cottonwoods gold again, Sarah knew she was carrying their child. She told Wyatt on a crisp October evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. "A baby." Wyatt's face transformed with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "When?" "Late spring," Sarah said, covering his hand with hers. "May, the doctor thinks." Wyatt pulled her into a tender embrace. "Another spring baby for our spring wedding. Perfect." His eyes searched hers. "How are you feeling?" "Wonderful," Sarah assured him. "Stronger than I did with the others, doctor. Wilson says I'm in excellent health." Relief flooded Wyatt's expression. Sarah knew he still carried the fear of losing her as he had lost his first wife in childbirth. "Nothing will go wrong," she promised, understanding his unspoken worry. "This baby will have the best of care, and so will I." The children's reactions to the news ranged from excitement to confusion. Benjamin, now 4, was particularly perplexed by the concept of a new sibling. "But where will the baby sleep?" he demanded. "My room is mine. The baby will stay with Mama and Papa at first," Emma explained patiently. "And then probably get the nursery fixed up. I could help build a cradle," James offered, his voice deepening now that he was approaching 13. "Mr. Peterson showed me how to use the lathe for detailed work." "I'd be honored," Wyatt said, clearly moved by the offer. "We could work on it together this winter." As Christmas approached, bringing with it memories of the previous year when their new family was just forming, Sarah felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. From the desperation of abandonment to the security of true love, from a struggling homestead to a thriving ranch, from uncertainty to purpose, the transformation seemed almost miraculous on Christmas Eve. After their now traditional decorating of the tree, Sarah and Wyatt exchanged private gifts. Sarah had commissioned a pocket watch for Wyatt, engraved with their wedding date and the words "for all time." Wyatt's gift to her was a rocking chair for the nursery, lovingly crafted by his own hands. "For the midnight feedings and lullabies to come," he explained as she ran her hands over the smooth wood. "And for the stories you'll tell our children, all 7 of them, about how our family came to be." Sarah settled into the chair, feeling its perfect balance. "Once upon a time," she began softly, "a woman and her children were left alone in a harsh land. They thought their story might end there in struggle and sadness." Her eyes met Wyatt's, filled with love. "But then a cowboy rode into their lives and said, 'Let me be their father.' And that wasn't their ending at all, it was just the beginning of their greatest adventure." Wyatt knelt before her, his hands cradling her growing belly where their child grew strong. "The greatest adventure," he agreed, his voice husky with emotion. "One I thank God for every day." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the silver queue in pristine white. Inside, the Moore Quinn family, forged not by blood alone but by choice and love, gathered in warmth and security, their future as bright as the star atop their Christmas tree. In May of 1887, Sarah gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Hope Elizabeth Quinn. The delivery was swift and uncomplicated, bringing relief to Wyatt, who had barely slept during Sarah's final weeks of pregnancy. When the midwife placed the red-faced, squalling infant in his arms, his expression of wonder and devotion moved everyone in the room to tears. "She's perfect," he whispered, bringing the baby to Sarah. "Just like her mother." The 6 older children crowded around the bed, each eager for their turn to hold their new sister. Even James, now showing signs of the man he would become, cradled the infant with gentle care. "Our family is complete now," Emma declared with the certainty of a 13-year-old. Sarah and Wyatt exchanged a knowing glance. Perhaps it was, or perhaps the future held more blessings. Either way, they had created something precious and enduring, a home where love conquered abandonment, where second chances led to first joys, where a family was defined not by blood, but by the heart's true compass. As Wyatt had promised on that autumn day when he first offered shelter to a desperate woman and her 6 children, they had made a home together. Not just for a season, but for a lifetime.